Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another deck profile, and for today's video we're finally going to be doing an updated Tearlament list. Now before we get into the profile itself, I just want to briefly talk about how I feel that Tear can actually do in the current metagame, because the recent Forbidden and Limited list did actually do a lot of good, but it did also do some bad to the deck, which is to be expected, right? This deck just cannot stop catching strays. But overall it's pretty solid, as Dweller was banned, Shifter was limited, and Druiswurm was limited, and all of those cards are just giant like thorns in our side that we constantly have to deal with. So seeing less of them or just seeing none of them in the case of a Bystial is always going to be greatly appreciated. That's great. And as for the negatives, they did end up banning Bahamut Shark, which is not something that I'm sad to see to go, because I hate Primeval with a passion, so any nerf to them is fine with me. But yeah, losing Bahamut Shark just means that we lost Totally Awesome, and that is a pretty major nerf for this deck, as a lot of our plays pretty much revolve around Toad being able to hit the field, whether it's providing us with an Omni Negate, and then in turn giving us fodder, right? Because its graveyard effect being able to add back Reinoheart and Tear Cache did actually matter a lot, because it meant that you could be a little bit more reckless with your resources, which you obviously can't really do as much anymore. And not to mention that it is a Aqua monster, which means that you would be able to fuse it back into the extra deck in order to make cards like Kaleidoheart. So yeah, just losing Toad, it hurts. I'm not gonna lie, but even so, we're gonna persevere, and with that out of the way, we can finally jump into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and because this is a pure Tearlament deck, that means that we're going to be maxing out on the entire Tear engine itself. So, as a result, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart to be able to foolish a Tear monster on normal or special summon, 3 Tearlaments Kashtira to be able to mill 3 cards on normal or special summon, and then 2 more when it's into the graveyard by card effect, and then 1 of each of the fusion summoners, being 1 Scheiren, 1 Havnis, and 1 Merrli, because they allow us to actually fusion summon, which is pretty important in a deck like this, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, just max out on all of them. When you're playing a pure Tearlament deck, you can't go wrong with it, as it's pretty much what allows you to have the most consistency possible, whether you're playing 40 or 60 cards. And spoiler alert, this is going to be 40 cards like it always is. Then for cards that just help the deck in general, we're playing 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Now, this doesn't actually advance our game state, but it's still super important just to be able to drop an Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, because we do not want to auto-lose to cards like Fuelos, which are a pain to deal with as well. So, got to play the 3 for that. Then we're going to be playing 3 Destiny Hero Malicious. So this is something that I used to play a while back, but then when the Fiendsmith engine came out, I basically just replaced them, because the Fiendsmith engine did everything that this engine did, but more consistently. And that is still very much the case currently, but I didn't feel like playing with Fiendsmith. So yeah, we're just playing the 3 Destiny Hero Malicious, which is still really solid. They're darks, which means that they already automatically have synergy, being able to be fused back into the deck with your Tearlament monsters. And then we're going to be using these to actually go into a card called Pilgrim Reaper, which allows us to mill 5 more cards. So yeah, I really like Malicious, even though it does tend to break, but it's perfectly fine, especially if you need a budget option for the Fiendsmith cards, you just cannot go wrong with this. Then for the other engine that we're going to be playing is 3 Imsety Glory of Horus and the 1 Hapi Guidance of Horus. So even though we're not playing the Fiendsmith engine, we are going to be playing the Horus engine, because it is pretty needed for the most part, and it does do a lot for the deck, right? As you just reveal it, discard a card, and you could discard your Malicious to basically make it free to add your King Sark, as well as just draw a card from Imsety's effect. Then not even that, but having 2 free bodies that can bring themselves back for free pretty much every single turn, with 3,000 attack and 2,400 attack respectively, is nothing to sneeze at either. And then the most important part is that they allow you to make Zombie Vampire, which is another card that allows us to just mill more cards from our deck. So yeah, these cards pretty important. And then we're playing a couple of 1-ofs just to round out the monster lineup, being the 1 Bystial Magnamhut and the 1 Bystial Druiswurm to stop all the Fiendsmith cards that are currently running around. The 1 Mudora the Sword Oracle, just because we need some kind of shuffler in the deck. We play the Keldo, but it's in the side just because I don't want to brick on too many. And then lastly, we're just playing 1 Beastking of the Swamps. So typically I would play 2 of this, but Bahamut Shark is banned, right? So it's not as important to have access to this card just to be able to go into that and then get the Toad. But I still felt like the deck was missing something, and by that I mean while the end boards could still be really powerful, I've always felt like we needed some kind of negate, and we finally get that in the form of like the Fusion Grapha. While it's not a true negate, it is a pseudo negate that lets us change the opponent's monster normal spell or normal trap effect to we discard a card. And even if you don't make the Grapha, Ruculus is still a really solid card as well. So yeah, I wanted to play at least just one type of Beast King, or King of the Swamp if you play like the level 3, but I just opted for this because sometimes you still need to like exceed summon, right? But with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion. Now that we're on the spell and trap portion of the video, we're going to be playing 3 of the best cards in the deck, being 3 Primeval Planet Perlereino, as this basically just does everything, right? As on activation, you're able to search your deck for any tier monster. It boosts all your tier monsters and fusions by 500 attacks, so you can beat your opponent down a little bit more easily. And then lastly, whenever a tier monster gets shuffled back into the deck, you get to pop a card for free. So yeah, this card, what more could you want in a field spell? It basically just does everything for the deck. Then for the other 3 that we're playing 3 Tearlaments Scream, as this is just another great consistency card, as whenever you or your opponent decides to normal or special summon and you control a face-up tier monster, you get to mill 3 cards, so you can use it on your turn or your opponent's turn. And then for the rest of this turn, after you mill the 3, your opponent's monsters lose 500 attacks. So it makes it pretty difficult for them to actually beat you on that turn with their monsters having like weirder attack than normal. And then, you know, you still have like the free mill 3 as well. So your opponent trying to overcome that is not going to be easy. And as if that wasn't already enough, when this card is sent to the graveyard, you're able to search your deck for any of your tier traps. So yeah, 3 Scream, got to play it in a pure tier deck. Then for the 2 elves, we're just playing 2 King Sarcophagus to be able to actually use the Horus engine, as if you don't have this on the field, you cannot special summon them back from the grave. But this is also really good at helping you get rid of the bricks in your hand in order to actually like fuel the graveyard, I guess, as you can just discard anything to foolish any of your Horus monsters. And we have plenty of cards that we want to discard, right? Beastking of the Swamps, Malicious, Mudora, and even some of the spells and traps depending on what your hand looks like. So yeah, 2 King Sark, pretty solid. And then a couple of 1-ups to help round out the deck, being the 1 Triple Tactics Talent so that we can sack our opponent when we open it, the 1 Called by the Grave to potentially beat any hand trap that may be used against us, and there are plenty of them, just to say the least. You know, you got Fua, you got Ash, Veiler. Some people play Ogre for whatever reason. Maybe your opponent has the 1-of Shifter, so you have the 1-of Called by the Grave, whatever. Point is, it does help a lot. We have the 1 Tearlaments Grief to be able to cheat out a tier monster by special summoning one from either our graveyard or our deck. And the graveyard effect doesn't really matter, but it can add back your banished tiers or banished tier traps. We play the 1 Foolish Burial to send any monster we want, and the 1 Foolish Burial goes to send any spell or trap that we want. And that's it for the spells. And then for the traps, we're playing 2 Tearlaments Sulliek. We're finally playing Tearlaments Metanoise, and I'm only playing this because we did lose Toad, but this basically gives us some kind of avenue to essentially add back a Reinoheart or a Tear Cache, probably Tear Cache, from our graveyard to our hand. So that's really the only reason why I'm playing it, but it's finally made its way back into the main deck after all this time. So, you know, it's fine. We don't really use the Book of Moon effect, even though there are certain times where you can just like straight up auto win the game if you flip a monster face down. So don't sleep on that. But for the most part, this is basically just to add back our resources. And then lastly, the 1 Trivikarma to be able to add any singular spell and trap that mentions Visa's Starfrost, which just so happens to be every single one of our tier spells and traps. So with that, that's the main deck, 40 cards like always. Now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now that we're on the extra deck portion of the video, we're going to be starting off with the Exceed monsters first. And as a result, we're playing 1 Time Thief Redoer just so that we could have the potential to, say, for example, detach a Scheiren or a Reinoheart and then get their effects off in the graveyard. But Redoer is just like a general solid card, especially because it takes key resources from your opponent and then grants you effects depending on what you take. We're playing 1 number 60 Dugares the Timeless because sometimes you just need to bring back a monster from the grave or draw 2 to maybe discard like a Trivikarma that you don't want in your hand or a Malicious or whatever. So yeah, just like, I guess it's like another consistency piece that we can access from the extra deck. Even though we don't really make it all that often, we're playing the 1 Pilgrim Reaper to be able to mill 5 cards from our deck and our opponent's deck. So this is like another consistency piece. It's literally just Kelbeck and Agito at home. Then we're playing the 1 Zombie Vampire to mill 4 more cards. And then for the final Exceed, we're playing 1 Super Starslayer ty-phon Sky Crisis because, I mean, it's just a very good card, and you're not always going to be able to break your opponent's board. So sometimes just being able to slap down the ty-phon is like a last-ditch effort to try and break your opponent's board, and maybe live another turn. Does work out pretty well, especially because we do play cards like Tear Cash, which we can use during the opponent's turn just to get a little bit more of, like advantage. But yeah, 1 Typhon, that's all you ever need. Then for the links, we only play 3 of them, being the 1 IP Masquerena, which is basically an end board piece. And that end board piece is either going to go into the SP Little Knight to banish a card on the field, or the Spright Sprind in case you need to special summon a fusion monster from your deck. This allows you to send a Merrli and then make like a Kaleidoheart or a Grapha or a Rucolos. Or for games 2 and 3, this is also extremely important for helping us get guaranteed access to something like Scattershot. So, just things to think about. That's it for the links. And then for the fusions, we're playing the 1 Destiny Hero Dangerous just so that we can have like another option to make when we're shuffling back on Malicious. And then because it is a level 6, that means we're going to be able to access Pilgrim Reaper pretty much immediately. Then we're playing the 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp, the 1 Guru Wings of Resonant Life, and the 1 Predaplant Dragostapelia. All really solid cards that are incredibly easy to make in Engine that just put pressure on the opponent constantly. And I really love actually Mud Dragon of the Swamp currently, if I can get it, because it has a really cool effect, right, where it's able to change its attribute. And as a result, I've been making this card a light a lot. And because it's a light, that means that when you're playing against like a Fiendsmith deck, your opponent is not going to be able to target their monsters on the field with their links in the graveyard, right? So they can't go Requiem, Sequence, or Agnumde and target one of their monsters, so unless they get rid of this card first, which actually does come up a lot. You'd be surprised. Then for the last 3 fusions, we're playing the 1 Grapha just to be able to have like a potential negate, I guess. Like, it's not a real negate, but changing a monster effect to a discard instead of being whatever it normally is does help sometimes. We have the 1 Tearlaments Rucolos to be able to negate special summons, and then lastly the 1 Tearlaments Kaleidoheart just to be like a general nuisance, because on special, or if an aqua monster gets sent to the graveyard from your deck, you're able to shuffle a card back into the deck from your opponent's side of the field. And then if your opponent decides to get rid of this with a card effect, it's able to bring itself back and then foolish any tier cards. So yeah, this card, pretty silly. And with that, that's the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!